What a shit show. What's up, book nerds? I'm Lucky's Universe, and in this week's video, we are going to be discussing the event that shook the YA community back in April this year. That's right, this is the Emily Duncan bullying scandal. Dun dun dun! I swear my channel is just becoming a gossip channel, but it's book gossip, so it's fine. Anyway, if you don't know what I'm talking about, first of all, how? Second of all, let me catch you up. Emily Duncan is the author of the semi-popular Something Dark and Holy trilogy. The first book is called Wicked Saints. In April 2021, another author exposed Duncan and others for bullying authors in a Slack chat room, which then signaled a downward spiral for Duncan as this urged book Twitter to dig deeper into her past and reveal an alarming pattern not just from Duncan, but other YA authors. It brought to light the discrimination faced by BIPOC authors in the book industry and the fact that white authors are still capitalizing on BIPOC stories over actual BIPOC authors. But before we proceed, let me run you through a few key phrases that you might need to know in order for this story to make sense. First term, BIPOC. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. For further clarification, because I do see this question being asked a lot, BIPOC does include those of Asian descent. It's essentially a term used for anyone who doesn't identify as white. Second term, YA. The term YA stands for young adult, specifically in reference to books written for those between the ages of 13 and 18, give or take a few years. The third term is Slack. Slack is a messaging app similar to WhatsApp that lets you coordinate public and private channels and direct messaging. It was initially developed as a business communication platform. Fourth term, Book Twitter. This one is pretty self-explanatory and refers to Twitter users and posts about books, authors, and other reading-related topics. The final term is anti-Semitic. You might have heard this word a lot on the internet, but not many people actually know what it means. The term Semitic by itself refers to a family of languages that include but are not limited to Hebrew and Arabic, and when you combine it with the prefix anti-Semitic means a hostility towards Jewish people. The next thing you need to know are the authors related to this scandal. Emily Duncan is kind of the face of this event, but there were at least 3 other authors in the Slack chat room. We've got Christine Lynn Herman, who's the author of The Devouring Grey duology, Rory Power, most known for her book Wilder Girls, and Claire Wenz, or maybe her last name is Wenzel, but no matter how deeply I searched, I couldn't find anything she's written. Okay, we have our people, let's set the scene. The day is April 5th. At 12:12 p.m, Rin Chapeko, author of the Never Tilting World series, the Bone Witch series, and many more, posts a tweet expressing their anger at a then anonymous white author calling an Asian author ugly and totally bad-mouthing their book because apparently it had a similar storyline and was going to be released at the same time. Many were asking for the name of the author who was doing the bullying and the name of the author who was being bullied. But Chapeko wasn't going to name the bullying victim without permission. But she did drop the name of the author, which was then confirmed to be Emily Duncan. Later on, the bullying victim confirmed themselves to be none other than Hafsa Faisal, the author of We Hunt the Flame. Book Twitter is nothing if not a cesspool of drama and chaos. So of course, when this information was released, the internet lost its shit. Like I said, Emily Duncan wasn't a household name at the time. She was mainly known in the dark fantasy circles. However, as soon as this scandal came out, the book community started researching her backstory, and what they discovered was far from satisfactory, but we'll cover that in a minute. The news reaches Book Talk, which happens to be my domain, and let me tell you, what a shit show. Other BIPOC authors started coming out with their own experiences of being picked on by white authors, and also they were coming forward about the discrimination that they were facing in the publishing industry. Some people were even defending Duncan, but thankfully a majority of people seemed to be disapproving of her actions. This was right in the middle of the Stop Asian Hate movement, so the fact that Emily Duncan had allegedly called another Asian author ugly, it did not go down well online. However, following the incident, Book Talk did see a pretty dramatic spike in BIPOC author recommendations and promotions. And I don't know why we always need an event or a crisis to promote BIPOC authors and their books, but I guess it is an upside to the whole situation. On the 7th of April, Duncan posted an apology on social media. You can pause to read it. She addressed several of the concerns that had circulated about her works. But fans expressed disgruntlement when she failed to address one particular rumor about her using several different accounts to harass authors and readers. Now, whether Duncan didn't address this because she knew it was a false rumor, or because she wasn't aware of the rumor, or maybe they were trying to cover it up, who knows? Duncan also announced that they were taking a break from social media, and she hasn't returned to our screens since. So, what did book Twitter uncover about Emily Duncan besides her recent scandal? Well, in 2019, Duncan allegedly tried to discredit and dismiss survivors of incest after they asked for trigger warnings on some of their posts. Now, it seems that Duncan has deleted these tweets. I could only find bits and pieces of it online. But Duncan's sentiments were also backed up by an author friend named Jessica Cluis, who wrote the Kingdom of Fire series. This exchange was immediately met with a heap of backlash, which is most likely what led to Duncan erasing the evidence. Now, remember that word I mentioned before, anti-Semitic. So again, this term refers to a hostility towards Jewish people and culture. So Duncan's first book in the Something Dark and Holy trilogy, Wicked Saints, has a setting loosely inspired by Eastern Europe, with the two main countries being based on Poland and Russia. Why this is problematic is because the country inspired by Poland has a magic system built on blood sacrifice, which seems to hint pretty strongly at the anti-Semitic trope called blood libel. Blood libel is a centuries-old false rumor that tried to claim that Jewish people murdered Christians, in particular Christian children, to use as sacrifices in their rituals. And you can see how that wouldn't go down well with the general population. Duncan themselves actually admitted to the presence of this anti-Semitic trope and apologized for it, stating in her social media apology that she recognized the significance of the blood libel claim and had tried to handle it tactfully and had just fallen short of the mark. They promised to do better in the future, but only time will tell. There was also evidence coming to light of Duncan getting mad at readers and bloggers who posted negatively about their books. A lot of this is along the lines of discrediting readers, and most of the tweets, at least from my perspective, seem to carry quite a condescending tone. But whether or not these tweets were actually meant to be hurtful or Duncan just didn't word them quite right, who can say? But all this prompts the question, just how long have authors been getting away with capitalizing off cultural appropriation and oftentimes downright racism? Sadly, since forever. BIPOC authors are still woefully underrepresented in the big publishing houses, relying on indie markets to get by, while white authors make millions off other people's cultures. And this brings up a whole lot of issues about who is allowed to write what. And don't get me wrong, white authors, including racially diverse characters, is a great thing, and we should definitely be seeing more of it. However, if you don't do your research, it can be really easy to misrepresent someone's culture and hurt people. For example, let's talk about the Own Voices movement. When you hear someone mention Own Voices, they are talking about a book that features a character or characters that share the same racial or ethnic identity as the author. If you watched my Dark Vanessa video, you would have heard me talk about American Dirt, in which a white author published a book about a Mexican woman fleeing her country. And even though that author later revealed that they were Puerto Rican, the book community was far from pleased with yet another white author capitalizing off and misrepresenting Mexican culture. Most BIPOC authors agree that yes, white authors certainly can write about characters of color, but it's best not to get too deep into the intricacies of that culture. And please, for the love of God, let's stop describing skin color like it's food. In light of the Emily Duncan scandal and sticking to the theme of cultural appropriation, let's talk about some other authors who have recently had the spotlight turned on them, mainly for their anti-Asian sentiments and misrepresentation of Asian culture in the YA community. J. Kristoff. This one really ticked me off, because even though I've never read anything by this author, he's an Australian author. And Australian authors are a bit underrepresented ourselves in the YA community, especially Indigenous Australians, so the fact that there's an Australian author out there giving the rest of us a bad reputation just really rubs me the wrong way. Anyway, J. Kristoff, who you probably know from his works like The Nevernight Chronicle and The Illuminae Files. Well, he also published this series called The Lotus War, which was dragged over the coals for fetishizing Asian characters. When asked about the research that he did for his novel, his reply was, well, this. In addition to this, fans also speculated that Christoph appropriated Maori culture in his book The Nevernight Chronicle. And you can't talk about stereotyping Asians without bringing up J.K. Rowling and friggin' Cho Chang. I mean, the name says it all. In a world full of characters with these amazing, complex, magical names, the one East Asian character is given the lazy and generic Asian name. Little sus, Rowling. Little sus. We have Rainbow Rowell's Eleanor and Park, which you've probably already heard about. It portrays a Korean character in an extremely stereotyped and fetishized light, as well as spouting negative dialogue towards Asians. So, what can we learn from all of this? In simple terms, let's just not be dicks and use common sense. I feel like in 2021, white authors more than ever are being held rightfully accountable for what they put in their books. But this isn't something to be afraid of. I myself, as an aspiring author who is white, recognize the insane amount of privilege I have going into the publishing industry. And even though my current project includes multiple characters of color, I'm not scared of being cancelled or bombarded with hate. Because I'm taking in the words of BIPOC authors and BIPOC readers and taking care not to appropriate anyone's culture in my book. And when you think about it, it's really not that hard. Man, we have covered some ground today. The Duncan scandal, the misrepresentation of Asian culture, the mistreatment of BIPOC authors. It's a lot. But it is important that we talk about these things so that we can learn as a group and improve ourselves in the future. To finish up, I have left a list of my favorite BIPOC authors down in the description box, and feel free to comment your own BIPOC authors that you want others to support. If you're looking to purchase books from an online store that exclusively sells books written by BIPOC authors, go check out Amplify Bookstore. This is not sponsored or anything, but they are an Australian-based company that ships internationally, so I would highly recommend checking them out. I will leave the link to their website down below. If you don't already follow me on TikTok, go check that out. I post some pretty cool stuff on there, and I will also leave a link to my Goodreads account down below so you can keep up with what I'm reading. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you later.